Hi, this is Kelly Holowecki, and this is my final presentation for History and Philosophy of Music Education, Music 601. In Unit 1, we focused a lot on gender roles in early music education. For example, in ancient Greece and Egypt, music education was for boys only. The boys participated a lot in competitions. This was particularly in Athens and Sparta, and Spartans were the more competitive ones. However, between the two groups, they were often competitive against each other. This helped music education, but at the same time, after a while with the competitive nature, they started seeking professionals instead of amateurs, so this did not end up helping music education in the long run. Boys at this time were taught instruments like the lute, lyre, and aulos. And music was taught as an academic subject versus a performance subject. This was called musica practica. It wasn't until the 13th century when the ospedali started showing up in Italy. These hospitals were orphanages for children who were abandoned. And this is where girls first started to receive music education. As Patrick pointed out in his Unit 1 slideshow, the girls were non-sexualized because of how they were placed up against the wall in the performances. So they were separated from the crowd, and you can see that in the picture on the left-hand side. Patrick also shared some pictures where the girls were behind screens. And this music education led to a rise in female performers and music educators. In Unit 2, we concentrated a lot on Pestalozzian principles and how they traveled to America. This all started with John Pestalozzi, who had a method in which he believed that nurturing children led to the best education. They were able to trust. It was like a mothering kind of a relationship. He also had a very organized structure in how things should be taught. This was picked up by Hans Nageli, and he applied those principles to music education, in which rhythm, tone, and things like that were applied. William Woodbridge was an American who went to Germany and saw the principles and brought them back to the United States in German. And it was Elam Ives who translated them to English, and he was also the first to use them in the United States. Lowell Mason was a friend of Elam Ives, and he advocated for the method. In Unit 3, band and orchestra finally joined music education. Prior to that, it was vocal education, and so now we had instrumental education joining the crowd. This became popular through town and touring bands, and at first it was only extracurricular, and these were rehearsal-based where the teacher would bring together all the instruments and kind of work with it that way, but they did not teach the students how to play their individual instruments. This happened through private lessons only. In Unit 4, we learn about the effects of war on music education. And again, the military bands inspire students to want to play and become musicians. So this helped the public school music program. However, there were some fallbacks due to the war. For one, there was an instrument shortage because they needed materials and instruments for the war itself. So this didn't help schools that were trying to build programs and needed instruments. There was also a lack of teachers because the men going off to war, so this forced many teachers to either come out of retirement, or we had female teachers that came and filled those roles. However, this still wasn't enough to go around, so some programs did have to close. Also, because of electricity issues, we went from an 8 to 9 period day down to a 5 to 6 period day, and this allowed students to complete study hall in school so that they were using daylight hours for their work. After the war, however, this did not bounce back to the 8 to 9 period day, and that's something that even now some schools are still working towards, building up those periods. But the 5 to 6 period day was quite common even after the war because of this change. During your discussions, my favorite one was the Pestalozzian impact, where we discussed each of the methods and how we use them. What I liked about this was seeing the different similarities and differences among each of us and how we use the principles. For example, I think all of us lead students to observe the second principle by hearing and imitating sounds, and then the resemblances and differences. However, there were some of us that interpreted things a little bit differently. For example, to teach but one thing at a time. Sometimes this isn't quite easy. I think this one we do a little bit more, but it was the fourth principle, one step at a time. Our understanding of what does it mean to master something before passing on to the next. Because in many cases in public education, you would never get anywhere if you mastered one thing at a time. However, there should be an organized structure, and I think we all agreed on that, so that was very interesting to find out. As I mentioned, we have varied understandings of different principles, and I think that our use of the principles were influenced by the programs that we teach, the grade levels that we work with, our personal beliefs in music education, and our class structures definitely influence how we use the principles. Hi, Dr. McLean. I just wanted to take a second and say thank you so much for everything that I've learned this semester. I've had a lot of fun, and this program has been really rewarding so far. And you've changed my life in more ways than you even know in the last 13 years that we've known each other. So I wanted to thank you for that. I hope you have a wonderful sabbatical next semester, and I look forward to working with you again after that. Ahui ho!